So welcome everyone to XpoNorth Digital Shorts. We're here with Micky. Micky has a very cool job in a place I absolutely adore. He is the Senior Advisor of the Creative Industries Fund in Nova Scotia, one of the most beautiful places in the world. Hello, Micky.
Hi, how you doing, Jessica?
So can you describe to us a little bit, because you do have such a cool job, who you are and what you do?
So I'm Micky Quase. I'm by title, by job title, to define myself by my work. I'm the Senior Advisor for the Creative Industries Fund at a department called Communities, Culture and Heritage for the government of Nova Scotia. And I do a few other things in that position. I'm fortunate. I also work in the storytelling end of the film and television industry. I have a smaller fund that puts money into getting different stages of development scripts done for film and television. And that's really fun. It's great. It comes off of my segue into the film industry a few years ago. Nova Scotia tried to put the film industry and the music industry together. And that agency lasted for 2 years. It was changed by an election, and the current government, who's still in all these years later, they changed the way they looked at economic development in the province. And the film industry was really a big part of the economic development of the province. This particular government chose to change everything in the film industry. We suffered some setbacks, but things picked up later. So I work in that, and as well in the creative industries. I work with the book publishers. Nova Scotia has a vibrant industry of book publishers. We have only 12, but they're small but mighty. And I got that gig because my boss at the time thought that there was a synergy between music publishing, which he knew I understood, and book publishing,
Is there?
which he knew I knew nothing about. Well, the interesting thing is there's a tremendous synergy. It's perhaps comes from a different place than I might have thought, but after 40 odd years in the music industry, I define so many other things by how it would have worked in the music industry. And so what it was interesting to discover was that the roles of different players in these industries are very similar. And once I realized that the book publisher was actually the major record label and the author was the artist, they were in very similar places within their own industries. And so that really helped me to catch on to the way book publishing worked. And of course, I had all these clients who were more than willing to help me in understanding their businesses, and they continue to do that today. So yeah, I've got a cool job because I'm working in music, which is my passion and music business. And late in the game, 15 years into this job, I'm able to learn brand new stuff quite often, and keep the job fresh.
Well, just for the audience, because I don't think they truly appreciate the amount of skills you're bringing to this very exciting job. So you were a musician to start on stage,
I
then
was an on-stage musician, yeah.
off stage and worked the kind of back end. You said you were traveling around the world with your artists, and then now you're in a position where you're running funds and being able to really make the maximum impact for a whole host of people. I wanted to ask you, because there's parallels, not just in the name, between Nova Scotia and Scotland.
Yes.
You're talking about the synergy between industries. From, you have funds for publishing, you have said you have funds for script development, music, and Scotland, I think, can really relate. There's Creative Scotland, which does a lot of that. There's, XpoNorth. We focus more on HIE, the Highlands and Islands,
Yeah.
enterprise, but a lot of it is overlapping. Can you, for us across the pond, can you talk a little bit about some of the challenges that you faced and some of the successes that you've had so that we might be able to learn from you?
Well, any direction here when you
Well,
say successes and challenges?
you're running multiple funds. You've been in the position for a while. You've earned the name senior, not because of age, but because of experience. I'm guessing. So when you first came to the industry, did you do things one way and then you found it actually worked better another way? Or if you stumbled upon something that you think actually really works?
Oh, I find that every day that someone introduces me to something that's a better way, or a more sensitive way, a kinder way. You know, um, when you're starting out in a business, and the music business is certainly a business. There's no question. When you're starting out and you're a step away from being an artist, because I think there's still, there's a purity in being an artist that business people don't really get to have it in the same way, even if it's part of our DNA. There is a part of business that requires setting aside the creative aspects of things, and getting the job done. And oftentimes it requires getting the job done within a certain context, the standard context, the one we're familiar with. And then, of course, we'd always like to have people who don't agree anymore with the good old ways or the way things have been. There's modernization. I mean, back when I was running 18 people on the road and traveling from country to country, venue to venue, playing shows, when I started, we didn't have internet. I speak at conferences, regionally now, and I say that, and all the young people in the audience look at me like, how did you ever do business? How did you ever manage to do? And they can list a variety of things, and you tell them silly stories about standing in parking lots of motels, in phone booths late at night, calling internationally, and just leaving silly messages like, "It's so and so. I'm calling about this. I have no phone number. I'm on the road. I'll call you back." And and I would put tours together like that. Now, of course, you send the emails out before you go, and you just pick them up as you go along, and you keep going back and forth, and it's completely different. But so there's always changes like that, things that we have to embrace. Technology right now, I guess, is the top of my mind. We're doing this on Zoom. I'm having staff meetings through a Microsoft product called Teams. With 17 or 18 people on the line, doing that. Everybody trying to find a spot to speak.
Are the funds still working? So in this time of COVID, are you guys able to still bridge the support to the artists?
We are, albeit we've made some changes. We're in the process of trying to make more. We're in the process of making more. We're in the process of trying to get our government to give us extra money for the year to make things happen. Here, it's probably similar in lots of different countries, but with all the different levels of government, what we've had here in Canada is we have the federal government who's putting up the big money. They're doing it faster. They're kind of fixing it as they go. They're trying to reach everybody. And their attitude has been, here's what we're going to do. If we missed you, give us a call. We'll figure out how to include you. That's been very encouraging to me. Governments don't always move quickly when it comes to things, and it's been really nice to see a government that's bold enough to not worry about getting it right
Quite right.
before they launch it. And I think that's been very important and very good for the people in Nova Scotia, both to have that kind of direct leadership. I say Nova Scotia, but really it's Canada. That kind of reaction has come from the federal government. The provincial governments are all kind of stick handling their way around the big package that's coming out of the federal government, trying to fill in the gaps that are more provincial and local, knowing that there's smaller groups of people that are being left out along the way through all that. And then you have a department like the one I work in, which is focused on the arts and creative people, so that again, we were always looking about what were the federal government doing, who did that cover, who did that not cover, what would the province then react to, and then we'd be the third reaction, as it were, was to not duplicate.
Is it
for those.
for the stories and the music and the publishing coming out of Nova Scotia itself? Is there something that you'd want us as maybe laymen to know about the types of stories? Was there a Nova Scotia culture that really imbibes all of those different distinct art forms?
Yeah. Certainly, there's cultural things that cross all of the boundaries. You're sitting in the Highlands of Scotland, and certainly in the Highlands of Nova Scotia, or at least coming out of the DNA of Cape Breton, the Highlands of Nova Scotia. There are recurrent themes that have run through everything. You know, I have one book publisher who only publishes Cape Breton stories.
Really?
Runs a Cape Breton magazine, a literary and cultural magazine, has done for years. He's in his 80s. We recently got him to start digitizing his collections and using QR codes like on his website and in some of their publications, so that you can dive deeper into the archives that they have, certainly for photographs and videos and things like that, on all kinds of topics that are just cross-referenced. So Cape Breton, of course, has a huge music culture, as you guys all know. And that's always vibrant. It has its own music industry association. It has its own craft association. So you know, and so that's one culture that's coming out and standing out. And of course, we have Indigenous culture. We have an African Nova Scotian culture that's very strong here, and we have an Acadian culture that's very strong as well. And so everybody's active and working hard, trying to get their words across.
This might be particular to this time, to the COVID time, but what are some of the needs that you're finding coming out of the different sectors that the Creative Industries Fund is supporting? What are those needs?
I think the biggest thing that came back to us in feedback initially after reaching out to all of our clients over the first couple of weeks, well, there were two things. The first, of course, was the basic: just get the creators some funds some way, so that they could just relax a bit in terms of paying rent, eating, having childcare, just like this very, very basic stuff. And a lot of these people are not folks who have great savings or anything to be ready for something like this. The cultural organizations, of course, needed money pumped into it just to keep them open, because there's no revenue. And for our creators, the change in being able to have revenue, particularly for performing artists, but for everyone really across the way. And in that case, the biggest real request, I think, that we've found across the board is for money and direction on how to be able to better present what you do digitally to the world. And we've found, for instance, that the music industry was very vocal about right away what they needed was they needed equipment to be able to do better quality concerts online, reach out, be able to play music for people, still do some performing, put some stuff on the web. So we've been able to assist with some of that. We're still waiting on the money part of it, where that's actually coming from. But we've got plans in place. We've got a couple of different ideas that we're able to put out for the sectors as to what kind of equipment they would need, what kind of instruction they would need to be able to put on digital shows, to create digitally, just to be able to, really come to terms with the fact that this may be the way we communicate for the next little while, and that art doesn't stop, the culture doesn't stop, that performers need to perform. In some cases, I guess it's a two-way street. Performers need to do it for themselves so that they stay grounded, they stay sane, they stay, continue to do what they believe they're here for. And of course, for all of the citizens across the world who rely on music to get them through the day.
Yeah.
And there's been such fantastic outpouring showing from the public just on what they require to do that and how much the arts help them. Now, the odd thing is that being the case, artists are really having trouble monetizing online shows. And that's probably a topic in its own. But straight across the board of all of the cultural industries, everybody has needed to raise the profile of how they market themselves digitally, how they communicate digitally, even if they're not marketing themselves, and just stay in contact with fans in a meaningful way. So that's been the call to arms to get up there and do stuff. I mean, the quality of a lot of this stuff is not good yet, but I think as the funds come out all around the world, really, to help people who are creators be able to then present their shows, their work, their ideas online. I'm thinking that the quality is going to get better. I'm thinking that the tools are going to get better, and hopefully they're going to get cheaper. But in the meantime, we're going to try to be there and help everybody in all the different sectors to get that, because they need revenues, and the main revenues really have dried up.
Yeah.
Book publishers are no different. They're not selling books. Bookstores are closed, and so we found that investing in the publishers to help them put out more digital books, investing in the libraries so that the libraries could get new money to buy digital books, so they could increase the numbers that they have available. I personally didn't know until not that long ago that there wasn't an infinite number of copies, digital copies of any book. It just seemed to me like, well, you've digitized it, then we can all borrow that book from the library. But of course, that's not true. There's copies. There might be 6 copies or 10 copies of a digital book. But in these times, there might be 100 people who want to read that right now. So the department I work for was able to invest in more money for libraries. And so that's been really good, because that seems to be all that most of my publishers are selling is digitized books right now. And that is a big change for them. Interestingly enough, the digitization is, buying digital books has never been a big thing here. So it's growing, and it's showing the publishers that it's something worthwhile to invest in. And so it's interesting to see how the different sectors are wrestling with staying alive. And it turns out that a lot of it is really relenting and coming to the internet and saying, you know what, I got to embrace this thing. This could be the future of the business. And if it's not the only future of the business, it's definitely going to be a component going forward.
How does that work with film and on location shooting and all that?
Well, so film, of course, is caught in between a rock and a hard place. The only kind of film production that is going forward right now here is animation. And so we have a very strong animation scene, which is good. So that's keeping those companies very busy. But you're absolutely right. All the production has ceased because they can't social distance. So there's nothing being shot. But what there is there's time, and there's people with ideas, and that's where the Screenwriters Development Fund has come into place, and plays nicely into what we're trying to do with keeping storytellers telling stories. It's really the most important thing. And from running the Screenwriters Fund for the last few years, I've gotten to know producers, and I've gotten to know writers. And those are the two components of the fund, and so it's the people that I interact with. So I think that what we've been able to do with that fund is keep it moving forward. To your question about like what runs, what doesn't run. So some of the funds are running as normal. Those tend to have been things where people would have applied in February before this whole COVID-19 thing started, and the fund managers would have started looking at this stuff in March, right in the middle of go home, work from home, communicate on screen, all these the big disruption. But the thing is, and so in my case, it was a May 15th deadline. We chose to go with it. We thought there'd be a lot of writers who had nothing else to do, to be frank, who would just be excited to get some writing done. We thought there would be producers who had stories that they really wanted turned into screenplays, who would have the time, not being in production, to organize all of that. And so we ended up with a record number of applicants to our May round, and we're just waiting to hear whether or not government's going to give us more money for this round, because there's such a demand. And that would be great, because then we could know that at least there's stuff getting written, so that when this is all cleared up and things get back to whatever they're getting back to, there will be good news stories in development that'll be ready for production and all that stuff. And of course, Netflix and all the other movie platforms, they've ramped up their whatever they can do, and they're looking for new material all the time, and they're investing during this time period. So that's been the solace, really, of the film industry, hemorrhaging money, but at the same time, getting new stories out.
You're lucky to have someone so thoughtful and knowledgeable and innovative as you in that position, because it sounds like you're doing a huge amount of good, and being very responsive to the needs that are changing at the moment.
Yeah, well, I think we all have styles of how we do things, and certainly my style in this kind of job is colored by 10 years on the road with a performing band, and a number of other years, working in these kind of industries is I can always picture myself. I can't always do that, but in a lot of cases, like, I just have to close my eyes and remember what a situation is like. And that really helps me in working with all of these industries. Is that I've been, this is how I used to make my living in a lot of these cases, and this is how I've gone forward, and and run the fund that I have.
Thank you so much for joining us. We are so over time, but I was so interested in what
I'm sorry.
No, before we go, I would love to leave with a little bit of advice. And you and I had chatted previously about the importance of mentorship.
Yes,
And I'm
yes.
curious if you had any advice of what it means to be a good mentor.
It's, it's, a lot of it's just being a good listener, being an observer of character, being interested in the person that you're mentoring, having a love of whatever the topic is that you want to pass on, being generous. I think those are the things you need, I think, to be a good mentor. That's what I found out of the mentors that I've been able to work with for other people in running programs, and to some of the ones that the folks that I sit back and think of as having been great mentors to me. They were all very generous of spirit and of time. Advice to all: be kind, be fair, be humble, be as good as you can.
Amen to that. Thank you so much, Micky, for
Thank
joining.
you, Jessica. It's been